This is the Stubborn German Podcast. I'm Kevin Ostie, coming to you from the beautiful Stubborn German Brewing Company here in equally beautiful and sort of chilly Waterloo, Illinois, which is just a couple of steps and a couple of slides away from the St. Louis metro region. And I'm joined, of course, by the proprietor of the Stubborn German Brewing Company, Mr. Chris Ron.
Well, hello there, Kevin.
Well, hello there, Chris. And our esteemed producer, Mr. Jared Chasson.
It's bustling in here.
It is. It's very bustling because we have a very special guest.
That's right.
We are joined by Mr. Adam Stumpf, who is the proprietor of Stumpy's Distillery.
Yes, thank you guys for having me.
Well,
Thanks for coming on, Adam.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so this is really cool because I'm sitting here between two owners of producing establishments.
Podcasts. I thought you meant you and Jared.
That's right.
Right. No, these are the guys that make the goods, right? So this is going to be a good episode. But I don't know if you're very familiar with this podcast, Adam, but a little bit of a tradition here is we start each episode with Chris's favorite thing of all time, and that is the German Word of the Day competition.
Yes, so the German word of the day. I'm really trying to give you one. I'm trying to hand it right to you. And I've been for the past few episodes. And,
No pressure, Kevin.
I mean, no one's picking it up, but if you guys don't get this, I mean, come on. Okay. The German word of the day is Fass.
Foss.
It's short and sweet. Just what is it?
Foss.
Guest goes first.
Yeah, we're very polite that way. What do you think Foss means?
Water.
Water.
Very good. Okay.
It's a one word for one word.
Water.
So that's good.
Got it.
Logic there. Jared?
Let's see. Well, if it's not water, it's got to be ferment. I know that's not that, but I'm going to say ferment.
All right.
One time we said, I think it was Jared that said, what is bratwurst
What's
in
the
German?
German word for bratwurst? Yeah.
No, so
I'll never live it down.
I hope not.
All right,
Kevin?
Well, I'm gonna take a stab at this one, and knowing that Chris has been trying to throw out some clues here,
I'm really trying.
I know. I'm gonna try and break tradition and maybe get one right, and I'm gonna say it means wheat.
Wheat.
All right. Foss. I like the reaction you got, too.
I know.
Kevin.
See,
All right.
Mr. Poker Face over
This
there.
could be the one. Could be the big one.
Foss.
Outstanding.
We'll find out at
Wheat.
the end of the episode. Please stay tuned.
Yes. Well, as we record this podcast, we are here in the Stubborn German Brewing Company. You can probably hear the patrons. There's a pretty good crowd here tonight. It's good to see, and I just really want
great crowd.
I want to say that it's been a challenging day and a little bit of a long week. And walking in here this evening and having people say, "Hey, Kev," and here's a drink, and here's the atmosphere. It was so nice. Really, it was kind of a cheers moment.
A little refreshing. A little.
And I really
Pick you up.
appreciate that. And it's common for what happens
Yeah.
here.
And now you're double fisting. Look at that.
Triple, actually. I got
I
water
don't know if
back.
the patrons had anything to do with that, actually.
So we've heard Chris's story a zillion times about how this place got started. So, Mr. Stumpf, let's hear the quick backstory on the Stumpy's Distillery.
Oh, God. Quick.
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things kind of snowballed together. So actually started by Googling how to make alcohol in college in Rolla, Missouri, if you guys are familiar with that town.
That's how it always starts.
Not a lot to do there. We were literally watching a Cardinals game, and we're like, man, people have been making booze for tens of thousands of years. This cannot be that difficult. Google how to make alcohol. And lo and behold, we could get all the ingredients we needed at Walmart. So
Wow.
yeah, we went out, we got some honey, and we got some baker's yeast, and we got one of like the little like in refrigerator like water containers, you know what I mean? And we put it all together and threw it under the cabinet, let it sit a couple weeks, and pulled it out and drank it, and it was some of the foulest liquid that I've ever put in my mouth. I mean, I'd say there's prison hooch that is better than that stuff was. It was horrendous.
But as a true
that's an
college
art
student,
form.
you drank it all.
Well, yeah, we tried. It turned into a contest, really.
There you go.
But then we graduated. We're like, okay, well, we can't do this. So we being engineering kids, we nerded out on the making of beer, and we made this little brew stand, and it was cool. It turned pumps on and off and temperatures on and off, and turned into this beautiful circle of life for college kids because we'd make beer, and then 2 weeks later we'd get to drink that beer, and then that kind of just turned into this cycle. So like we'd be draining a keg as we're filling another one. It was just
That's very nice.
absolutely beautiful. Fast forward a few years, went to work for Anheuser-Busch InBev in St. Louis here. Did everything. I was in production, engineering, logistics, kind of the get beer into a bottle and then get bottles on the road to people.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Let me pause you here. Was that something you wanted to do before, like when you started college, like I want to go work for AB, or was that like, hey, I started making my own alcohol, let's go work at AB?
Or AB's hiring engineers.
Right. Well, that too, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All of that.
Exactly all of that.
It was one of those things. And Chris, you know how it is. Like whenever you start to make alcohol, there's just like whether it's beer or wine or liquor or whatever. Like there's just romance about it, right? It's.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. As we sit in your brewery, yeah. So,
Chris hugging his beer stein, does
Yes.
that give it away?
You saw that?
So, it was kind of this passion of the industry and wanted to explore it a little further and that kind of thing. So while I was at AB, I went back to WashU. I was doing my MBA at the time. There was a guy there, very insightful, and he's still a mentor of mine today. He was in beer. He was August the 3rd's advisor. He ran Eagle Snacks for AB for a while. He owned a winery in Napa Valley, like very tied into the beverage alcohol industry.
Guy's the real deal.
Yeah, so he was the teacher of our entrepreneurship class and kind of this focus that we were doing, and that's really where we put the business plan together, and I struggled a lot. At that time, we knew we wanted to do a distillery, and I did. My wife didn't.
She didn't know it yet?
Yeah, she didn't know yet. So at that point in time, we knew we wanted to do a distillery, but I really struggled with what is the value proposition of a craft distillery, because you could go out and at that point in time you could get Henry McKenna 10-year bottled and bond, $32.99 on the shelf all day long. You can find it everywhere.
That's back when Elmer T. Lee was still on the
Yeah.
shelf for $35.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
Absolutely.
days.
Yeah, for real.
Kind of, yeah.
Or you could go get this new 18-month-old bourbon whiskey from Chicago for $60. So there's a bit of disconnect there. Not that age is, necessarily the only driver of quality, but there seemed to be some kind of disconnect. So at that point, we decided the value that we're going to put into our bottle for our consumers is we're going to take the Napa Valley approach to making whiskey. We're going to go single-sourced, and we're going to grow every kernel of grain that we turn into booze. So you really do kind of, in my opinion, end up with this terroir effect and all that stuff, because we don't source rye out of Canada. We plant winter rye instead of rye planted in the spring and harvested in the fall, so different growing conditions and all this stuff. So made the commitment at that point, and we've kind of stuck to it since then. Fast forward a few years, we opened our doors in July of 2015. Met Chris probably right around then, or maybe just a little before.
Just
probably.
a little before, I think.
Because you were at the madness of bartending in the tiny little tasting room that we had there in the front.
I sure was. Yeah.
Would you care to tell a story about that day?
I do have a fun story about that day. So yeah, it's Stumpy's grand opening day, and it was pretty hot that day, right?
It was really hot.
It was very hot. And
Middle of July.
Everyone is like, I mean, there's so many people that they do not fit inside of Stumpy's waiting room or, gift shop area or whatever. No, waiting room, gift shop, merchandise area. So, there's people just dying to get in. So it's kind of hot inside because it's shoulder to shoulder. And Tammy and I are behind the bar. So Adam and Laura basically say, well, we know you're opening a brewery. You're going to need to learn how to bartend. And this could be a fun kind of a, help out your friend type situation. Yep. So we're like, yeah, that'd be awesome. I could use some experience bartending. And
great idea at the time.
Yeah. In a year, we're going to have our grand opening. So I need to know how this goes. So, yeah, here we are behind the bar. This is my very first time behind a bar.
Really? It was also our cash wrap, too.
Oh.
Yes. So yeah, and so yeah, we're back there and we're making these drinks and stuff, and it was fun, very very stressful, but fun. And I remember I had two real highlights of the day of my shift, and I think it was probably only like an hour and a half or 2 hours. It felt like all day long. But my highlights of the day, number one, were I made this drink. I think it was the one with the worm in it.
The
gummy
crazy worm. Yeah,
the crazy worm. Yeah.
Oh, it's a thing.
Fun drink, but yeah, I made one. It looked beautiful. Dumped it right in the cash drawer. I mean, directly in the cash drawer, upside down.
Nice.
And I remember, what was it, your mom? I think somebody that was helping. I was just like, okay, you can just go stand back there. I'll clean this up.
That's hilarious.
And then my other one was. Well, you had the vodka out, of course, right away, and then you started with just the White Dog, the regular whiskey, unaged, and that was like the hard one to get, right? You only had so many bottles, and of course, we get down to just a handful of bottles left, and I have one of the last remaining bottles of whiskey in my hand, and I drop it on the floor, and it goes. And at that point, I exited the bar.
That's the last time you were invited to Stumpy's.
That's right. It kind of was. Now I just show up whenever I feel like it.
And he was like, get your own damn bar and spill everything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that is that's kind of the whole lead up to kicking off all the craziness that's happened since then.
Yeah.
So the challenge of controlling every aspect of the product, of growing it, and then, I guess that's kind of internal distribution, and not everybody can do that. Somebody listening could be living in an apartment in Slovenia, and they can't grow anything outside of the window box. So what were the resources that you had at your disposal to be able to launch this operation?
Oh, goodness, the resources. Well, we mortgaged everything that we owned, so it was literally personal savings. We mortgaged our wedding rings, the house, the cars, literally.
All in.
Everything.
Yeah,
everything.
Nice.
I don't know how that feels.
Yeah.
Well,
which is why we became such good friends, I feel like, because we were in the exact same boat.
Oh, man.
Sure.
Yeah, so at that point, you are all in, regardless if you want to be or not. You are.
You got to make it work. Yeah.
So those are the resources we had. That's what we did. We started the company on personal savings and a bank loan, and that's it. And my wife and I still own 100% of the company today. But the big resource we have at had and still have at our disposal is an amazing family, because what they allowed us to do was basically rent a portion of our 8th generation family farm from our family, and they're amazing enough that they let us use the equipment and all that stuff, and we manage our stuff and pay for the inputs and manage the farm for the distillery and all that, but they let us use the equipment, and obviously without the equipment and without the access to ground, it doesn't happen. It's hard to be a new farmer, so without them, it would have been impossible.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that is so cool. And we didn't mention this before in the intro, but your distillery is in Columbia, Illinois. It's right up the road.
Right down the road.
So the interesting thing to me is we have, these two outstanding establishments at our disposal right here, just, local people with great places to go and great stuff to drink, and with really cool stories of going all in and controlling that whole process from the beginning to the end with a lot of thought and a lot of, I guess what I'm trying to say is this is not simply like relabeled Stoli in a bottle.
That's exactly right. It was the opposite of that.
Right. This is organic from ground up, and that's cool.
Yep. Thank you very much.
And Adam, how many grain to glass? Is that what you call it? Grain to glass? Is that what's the term?
There's no term for it.
He was calling it ground to tongue earlier.
That's what I do after I drink the whiskey.
Tongue to ground.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Some order of that. But as far as I know, for a single source distillery, I believe there are 3. Grain to glass, I think that is anybody who's taking grain and actually turning it into
that's not
the
really
spirit. Yeah, I mean, that could be, somebody that you can buy grain from a distributor and turn it into whiskey, and that's awesome. You're doing your thing. You could, there's other farm distilleries out there where they grow a portion of their grains. Generally, corn. Obviously, we happen to live in an area where corn grows well. Wheat, rye, those types of things. But as far as the single source distilleries go, I know of one other for sure, possibly 2, but the one that I'll speak to is, he's like an idol of mine too, Colby Frey at Frey Ranch Distillery in Fallon, Nevada. It's like the desert, and then there's like this little green strip, and then Colby's like right in there, and they farm all kinds of stuff, and they do everything on site, malt their own grain and everything. So they're the other one that I know of for sure.
That's cool.
It's awesome.
Wow. And you said this is the 8th generation family farm?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because we get to double count in a bit of a way. So
This is a cool story, too.
welcome to Monroe County.
Right.
So we have this mapped out in the distillery.
Yes.
And I have to explain to people that this is not a family tree. This is a land tree. This is the way that the land has moved through our family. So
That's very important.
I'll preface with that.
Well, a straight line family tree is not a good thing.
Is that a telephone pole? What is that? Basically, we always heard there were a bunch of German farmers because back in the day, English landowners couldn't make ends meet, and their help was right off the boat, and they would end up getting chunks of ground to basically work. We went back through our farm's abstract, and sure enough, my great, maybe one more, grandpa on my mom's side was deeded the original 200-acre family farm for $1.
Wow.
Crazy. I wish land prices were still that cheap. They're not.
Right.
So you taking offers? Or?
Yeah, right.
I'll double that.
It goes to their kids. They had 2 sons. One of the sons was killed along with his wife in a farming accident. So they had 3 children and a brother, and they ended up selling the farm. This is my mom's family, right? In 1904, they sold that farm, and there was a bad flood year before, and my dad's family had farmed down in the river bottoms, Columbia River Bottoms, if you know where the sod farm is down there. Mm-hmm. That's where they farm.
Yeah.
So the story is they loaded up the mules and the wagons, and they were headed up through Fountain Pass as like water was coming up.
Up the hill.
Yep, get to high ground. So in 1904, my dad's family buys the farm from my mom's family. And then 80 years later, my mom and dad get married. So
Nice.
Wow.
tracing that through, people get confused about that one arrow right there.
Right, yeah. What happened right there?
It's a land sale.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Well, that type of story is it is a little tricky to follow. I have kind of a parallel in the sense that my family's from the Chicago area, Germany before that, and my grandparents knew each other in their family church. So when I was growing up, my grandparents would be at the house for Christmas or whatever, and they're telling stories about things that happened long before my parents were born.
Oh, that's funny.
Right? And they knew each other.
Sure.
And when I was a kid, I thought it was all like the same time space.
Right.
Like, well, Mom and Dad must have been there because you two were there, and now, you knew each other before that. And so it's kind of a similar...
Small world. It's crazy.
So what's it like to run this operation? So I've gathered you've got an engineering degree and then the MBA. Is the farming component, just because of the family that you've kind of picked up along the way, or what's the deal?
Yeah, so I guess 2 pieces to that. The farming component, I grew up in Columbia, assumed my whole life that I'd probably farm until Mom and Dad said, "You're not going to farm. You can farm, but you're going to go to school first."
Okay.
And decide what you really want to do. So, I kind of always assumed that I'd be a farmer until I went to school, and after I ended up getting a job, was always looking for a way to get back to the farm. So, kind of a funny thing there. But running the business on a day-to-day, we're a super small shop as far as team goes. And, we've got 2 people in the market. We've got generally 4 to 5 people working in the distillery on production and those types of things on any given day. My better half, for sure, she basically runs the entire... Anything that's not production related is Laura. So
nice.
She handles all of that stuff. And basically, our brand has got a look and a feel and all that stuff, and she is... completely responsible for that. And then our tasting room team, of course. So that's one of the biggest things for us is getting people into the tasting room and getting them a tour and experiencing, farm to glass spirits, basically. Mm-hmm. So we make sure that we hire, the best people to do that. So we've got an absolutely incredible team that helps us out there on the weekends as well.
Well, it's interesting because first of all, Chris and I also have that parallel universe story of our wives make everything happen.
For sure.
In our businesses. So cheers to that. But there are obviously a lot of different distilleries and different people that are, brewing beer and different brew pubs and breweries and whatnot. But there's not that many good ones. I mean, there's a lot of good ones, but there's also a lot of, people that are passionate about it, but they don't. It's just not the greatest. And when I first tried some Stumpies, it was some of your bourbon, and I think I bought it at the local Schnucks, and I was really unaware that this came from right up the road in Columbia from a single source, younger generation enthusiast distiller, because it looks insanely commercial. I mean, the level of quality of the packaging and the bottle, it's right there with everybody else, and it's really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's impossible to tell that whole story. I mean, however long we've gone, 20-something minutes of this podcast, it's impossible to tell that on the front of a label where you're making that purchase.
Yeah.
So you do what you can, and I still think they do an awesome job with it.
I agree, totally. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the hardest part for sure. I mean, because the making it, for me, it's the fun part, and I feel like it's the easy part. Selling it is the hard part. It really, really is. And
well, I was going to ask. So, with Chris and Tammy, they start a brewery. They're making their own beer. That in itself is so cool and a huge story. But you guys sell it at your bar, right? I mean, know your customers. They come in. You know what you're selling. That's not the same with you guys, right? I mean, you don't have a bar, so to speak, that people come in and just order a shot, right?
That's correct. Not yet. And the reason that is because the legal landscape in Illinois looked different than it does now when we started the distillery. When we started the distillery, distilling, there were no craft distilling laws in Illinois. There were just distilling laws. So if you think
there were only craft distilleries, right? I mean,
other than Diageo, and Diageo has a big plant up in Plainfield, and then ethanol plants. You've got ADM that makes 500 million gallons a year in Decatur,
and you end up falling under some of that stuff.
Exactly.
Wow.
So
crazy.
And this was the same at the federal level. It wasn't just Illinois.
Yeah.
When we started, our only route to market was. Basically, I couldn't come down to Chris and sell Chris a bottle. Illegal in the state of Illinois for me to do that. I have to sell to a third-party distributor who then turns around and sells that to the retail establishment.
Did you say that's how it used to be, or it still is?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So recently, within the last 2 years, there have been some updates. Finally, beverage alcohol kind of went through this renaissance period. First the wineries, then breweries, and then distilleries. I mean, when we started, we were a distillery. I don't know. We were in the low to mid 1000s. There are, I think, 2,800 at last count.
Wow.
We just started in 2015.
Wow. Yeah, nice.
So the industry is really booming. So it just takes time for the laws to get updated as well.
And like these state laws that we're talking about, these are back from Prohibition.
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
They were Prohibition happened, then we repealed Prohibition, and with that comes all these crazy laws and restrictions that not crazy. I mean, some of them are good. Most of them are crazy and insanely outdated at this point. And it's like finally, we are starting to see some of those updates and upgrades to the laws to where a smaller mom and pop type of a situation can actually survive and thrive if you can't.
They've basically kind of given us options at this point, so you can continue to distribute through your distributor, and you can also at that point technically purchase beer and wine from a wholesaler, which we couldn't do before.
Okay.
Or if you are under a certain limit, you can do all of that and also self-distribute. So it's nice that there's at least options and flexibility now. And I know some startup distilleries that's been their saving grace, and it certainly would have been ours getting started. But we were very, very, very fortunate to make some really great relationships very early on when we were just getting going.
That's really cool, and I think part of the story is that when you're walking down the liquor aisle of a grocery store, that bottle can't tell that story of how you started and all the rest. So if your product relies solely on getting to know the story, you're at a distinct disadvantage, sitting next to all those other products that might have more brand recognition. And thinking back, I almost think that the first time I purchased it, some Old Monroe, was because it said Old Monroe. And Chris, you got to help me on this. So I obviously didn't grow up here. If you're talking about the county, it's Monroe, right? It's
Monroe County.
Monroe County.
Yes, but if we're talking about the whiskey, it's
Old Monroe. Yeah, right. So there's a little
way different.
disconnect there. Yeah.
Exact same place.
So I looked at that and I thought, so whoever is stocking the shelf was smart enough to tie the name in, not knowing, again, that it's actually from Monroe County. I just thought, I'll give it a
Whoever
shot.
purchased this decided, it says Monroe, so
Might appeal to somebody, and I'm trying to fit in, so sure, I'll drink the Monroe.
hey, everybody, hey, new friends,
Look what I got.
look what I brought to the party.
I got some
I'm
Monroe.
from here.
That is awesome.
But it was great. Crack it open and have a sip, and it's like, well, I'm going to buy this again. I mean, I didn't know, and I didn't need the story to get that sale. Put it that way.
That's cool.
So to hit that on you don't need to rely on any one of those elements to have that success. And then again, like I said, it's good. And now knowing more of the story, it's like, well, we need to support this guy. We need to support these businesses and these people that are that passionate to go that far into it to make this happen on a product. And believe me, my business, we restore old cars. Nobody needs what we do, So,
But we all want it.
We all want it, and I'm not saying you're in the same class, but it's an item that isn't like food or electricity, right? It's I don't want to call it luxury. What do you call this?
Fun?
It is fun. It's damn
Fun in a bottle? I don't know.
So and to be successful at it's got to be good. So it's very cool.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So whenever Chris and I have talked about your products in the past, and when your name comes up in conversation, there's always a term that follows, and Chris always says, "Yeah, Adam's going to geek out on that."
That tends to happen. I'm a geek.
Well, it's interesting to know that here's a distiller with an engineering background.
Yeah, and I mean it's funny because we've gotten so into our business because we did start with limited resources. So like when we filed our paperwork, we didn't hire an attorney to do that and file it with a TTB, right? So we did all of that ourselves. Same with recipe development, equipment selection. We didn't hire consultants because we didn't have the money to do that.
Sure.
So geeking out was kind of part of the process, and that's really kind of, I feel like, what helped accelerate the passion. I mean, when you have to be involved in every aspect of the business, it's really cool. It's what you do. I mean, you know what it is. You live it, you breathe it. It's 24/7.
And I mean, we say geeking out, and like, so the plan for this podcast is to actually make it a 2-episode podcast. So they're cats out of the bag. But on the second one, I want to really dive into really some of the geeky, nerdy stuff about Adam's engineering his own stills and all this. And there's some really cool stories there. And I mean,
So subscribe.
and you'll automatically get the next one. But no, but I mean, I go to Kentucky and I visit distilleries. Kind of like my really good customers go to breweries and they just want to see them all. Like they're all on the list and I want to check them all off and I want to try something from every place. I'm the same way with distilleries. And of course, we do the bourbon thing here at the bar and we go do barrel picks and all that. So anyway, we're in Kentucky, and if I ever am at a place where I drop Adam's name or the Stumpy's name, and say where we're from, you always get some, people that are just like, oh, you're right up from them? That's really cool. And like they know of Stumpy's down there, which to me is like, that's really cool. But like,
did you ever hear of Stubborn German beer?
No, hell no. They have not. But no, they'll always follow that up with like, didn't he like design his own still, and doesn't he? They always have these stories about Adam. Adam is very well known in the liquor producing community, or at least the places that I frequent.
That's cool.
I mean it's really awesome, and to see the respect that he gets, and then to come back home and be like, how freaking lucky are we that this place is right up the road? We can go there anytime.
Stop! You're making me blush.
Sorry.
Yeah, right.
That's why I brought you here.
Well, and again, so that's a great topic for our next episode
Yeah.
to take a deeper dive into the bottle, and that's not
Right.
just a metaphor.
No. No, we're going to do that.
Yeah. So I guess this half then is still kind of on the story of how and why and whatnot.
Right.
So when you started to produce the product, how did you land on what you wanted to make?
We did not until recently.
Oh, right on.
We made a lot of stuff. Our rick house right now has probably got, I think at last count, like 22 recipes aging in it, which
Nice.
is really stupid for a small producer to do.
I was going to say, who do you think you are, Bardstown Bourbon Company?
Yeah, no. If only. No, so we're not from generations of master distillers and don't have the old family recipe, and all this stuff. Sure, we revived the name of a bourbon that was distilled on our hometown's Main Street, but we didn't know what to make, how to make it, all that fun stuff. So it was a lot of research. Some of that included drinking whiskey. Shucks.
Part of the program.
It was a lot of research. Once we got open, though, just in experimentation, we started with a recipe that I kind of thought was going to be roughly our house recipe. It was 60% corn, 30% wheat, 10% malt. Pretty expensive for a distillery to make a bourbon whiskey that way because most big guys are running what, Chris? About 70 plus,
something
75, yeah.
Corn, yeah.
Exactly.
Which is cheap, right? That's
yeah,
the
exactly.
cheap part.
Yeah, corn's the cheapest grain of everything, right? It's 6 cents a pound versus rye is 30 cents a pound now.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy. So, not only does that have an impact on cost, it also has an impact on quality. So we decided to go on that, quality being above all else. But then we started to deviate because I always have this what if? So we played around with a bunch of different yeast strains. We got so nerdy as to distill single grain recipes to see what does this grain do if it ages on its own. And that's exactly where this came from, this wheat whiskey that's in front of us now. So we distilled Bloody Butcher red corn, put it away in a barrel. Yellow dent corn, put it away. Sweet white corn, put it away. Rye, malt, wheat, you name it. Basically any grain that we could grow.
So and just to dumb this down even a little bit more, you're literally taking rye and you're making a whiskey out of only rye, and then you're literally making a whiskey out of only these types of corns and on their own.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha. And then the thought is to later on blend them back together into something or not, depending on...
That's exactly right. Either blend them together to create a flavor profile, basically, right? Or if they're good enough to stand on their own, let them stand on their own, right?
Sure.
So
now you said put it away, and you said later on. How much time are we talking here?
It depends.
Okay.
It always depends.
Depends on how it tastes, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Different grains age differently. Rye whiskey, for example, rye is so packed full of flavor, you can get a whiskey out in a shorter period of time just because the grain has so much influence on that whiskey. Whereas if you're doing a wheated bourbon, it probably needs to sit for a little bit longer to really kind of turn a corner. So right now our target is pretty well 4 years is kind of what we're shooting for.
Wow.
But there is some data out there that suggests that 8 years is the most complex and most well-balanced whiskey that you can have. We buy barrels from Lebanon, Missouri, Independent Stave. They are, in my opinion, the world's best cooper, best barrel manufacturer. They supply all the big guys. I mean, Heaven Hill, Buffalo Trace, Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, Barton. If it's Kentucky bourbon, it's probably in an ISC barrel.
Every single one, yeah.
Nice. And that's in Missouri.
Yeah. They also have a cooperage in Lebanon, Kentucky.
Lebanon, Missouri, Lebanon, Kentucky.
It's very confusing.
Okay.
And if you look at
Double
the
Lebanon.
rivets on the barrel hoops, they'll either say KY or MO,
Oh, cool.
depending
Yep.
on where it was built.
Very cool.
All of ours are MO.
Nice.
So they've got a really cool research center because they've got access into all this, Kentucky bourbon, right? All these producers. So they did a gas chromatograph analysis and found out specifically what chemicals are in these whiskeys, right? And they tested them, everything from new make right off the still all the way up to, 23, 25-year-old bourbon. And at 8 years old, that is the most complex, most balanced whiskey that you can have. Now, you may not prefer that. You may prefer something a little bit sweeter. So you might like a younger whiskey. It's going to be more influenced by the grains, some of the very early barrel notes. Where Chris, you might like something that is older than that because you like earthy notes, tobacco, leather, all those things. So the cool thing is that, there's some science behind it, but still at the end of the day, it boils down to what you prefer as a consumer. So that's really the fun part.
Yeah.
The tongue doesn't lie.
It does not. Nope.
So using that metric of 8 years is peak complexity is what you said. What starts happening after that? Do certain flavors take over the other ones and diminish them? Or?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you make whiskey, you've got all these different chemical compounds in it. And when things come off the still, there's all these organic acids in it, basically. So what happens over time, and this is why whiskey gets so much better, is, there's a few things that happen. So as temperature goes up, it's kind of like a water bottle in your car on a hot summer day, right? Mm-hmm. The liquid inside that bottle expands. The bottle's going to get really tight. At lunchtime, it's going to feel like it's going to blow up. Same thing's happening in a whiskey barrel. Luckily for us, that white oak is slightly porous, so that whiskey actually gets shoved into the wood. That's where it gets the color, the flavor, the aroma. The charcoal that's on the inside is smoothing that whiskey out over time. And then in the wintertime, it's going to contract. It's smaller, lower temperature, and the whiskey's going to come back out. So it's kind of like a big oak sponge, right? So the more times the temperature fluctuates, the more times you squeeze the sponge. They say Kentucky's got the perfect climate for aging whiskey, but oh my God, welcome to St. Louis. It's insane here, especially right now. But so you got all those things, but the other things that happen are those organic acids. In the wintertime, there's going to be a lot more dissolved oxygen inside that whiskey. So that oxygen is going to basically oxidize those acids and turn them into esters, so that your whiskey is going to get fruitier in the wintertime. So it's really all about going through these cycles, right? The more of these cycles you go through, the more complex that's going to get. But
how much character did your barrels pick up over the last 2-3 weeks here?
With the weather fluctuations that we've had.
You're smiling now.
You walk back in the rick house and you can smell it. It smells good back there. But at a certain point, things tend to get over oaked. So I've heard
too many rides.
Yeah, there were
exactly.
There was a bourbon out there. I forget who the heck did it. I think it might have been Glenmore's, like 47 years old or something like that.
Oh boy!
And I know somebody who got a taste of it, and they were like, it was like licking a pile of sawdust. It was absolutely atrocious.
So some of these, 25, 30-year-old, I've tasted one super old one. I want to say it was between 25 and 30, and it was like chewing on a toothpick. And it's a very, very coveted bottle that people would, give their left arm for. And
just for what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. For the name of it and the story and
Well, that is fascinating, and that's something I never knew that process before, and it sounds like that's good episode 2 stuff. But right now, I would like to get your thoughts on what it takes to pursue, and there's a term out there, follow your dreams, right? Follow your dreams. I'm not a follow your dreams guy. I'm a go hunt your dream down and wrestle it to the ground and get it, right? And it sounds like that's what you've done. So what do you tell somebody who, wakes up living in Columbia, Illinois that says, I want to basically have my own version of, Lebanon, Kentucky here and making it happen? What's it all about?
You guys know it. It's the hardest but most rewarding work that you'll possibly do. You have to have an unbelievable desire to succeed for whatever reason, whether it's making sure your business doesn't fail, making sure your family doesn't fail, whatever. That has to be there, and the passion has to be there regardless. That's anything in life, right? Anything you're doing. The biggest thing for us, though, I feel like, was being able to take criticism and not, people have opinions, obviously, and people can say, oh, your stuff sucks. And you could say, oh, well, that's your opinion. Yeah, go fly your kite somewhere else or whatever. But,
I love that.
Oh, they got him.
I'm going to use that.
There's plenty more coming. But, at the end of the day, that's someone who decided to purchase a bottle or purchase a drink and they don't like it. Well, why don't they like it? Tell me why you don't like it. Let's have a conversation about this. Is it...
Drop the ego.
Yeah, exactly. So, whenever you can actually learn from that, I feel like there are a lot of steps you can make. And, we'll go into this in episode 2, I'm sure, but, Chris knows we played equipment bingo. We haven't played equipment bingo just for the heck of it. We played equipment bingo in chasing higher quality every single time. I mean, the still that we started with, it was very rudimentary. It couldn't make the quality and caliber of spirit that we wanted to. And after we started making liquor, we found that out. And some of that was from consumer insight. And
That's a tough realization, I bet.
It is.
It is, but you got to start. You got to get going. You got to do something. And
So not be discouraged by that,
Right.
And use it as fuel.
And don't get me wrong, it's discouraging at times. Like, I mean, you can get 1 billion 5-star reviews, and you can get 1 1-star review.
Oh, that'll haunt you forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's the one that sticks in your mind?
And what I've learned is, if you have the luxury of being able to qualify that opinion, because if the 1-star guy, I hate your bourbon, well, why? Because the label's green. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
The old, at least the one that I remember being like, okay, forget this guy. We got a 3-star review, but the only reason we got a 3-star review was because we weren't as big as Maker's Mark. Okay, yes, that's true.
3 stars.
If
that.
If I've earned that, I earned that one.
Yeah, I guess I'll claim
This
that.
is true.
But there's it's got a lot of implications to it, because it's not just equipment. Like, you've got to make a better product, and we always strive to make the best product we can with what we have available. There are commercial implications to that too, because now this bottle's on the shelf, and it's going to materially change as we upgrade and get better and more sophisticated and all those things. So the vodka is a perfect example. If you try one of our very first bottles of vodka versus a bottle today, it's completely different. I mean, it's a completely different spirit, and it's just the way we've done it. So yeah, there's been a lot of brand rebuilding, but to me, that is almost the most rewarding piece of it. Is when you had someone who said, "Hey, this isn't good, and I don't like it because of X, Y, or Z," and you can turn them into a believer. Like, that's
and you can know in your heart that you did something to fix those issues and try to make it better. I say it all the time too. Like, Stubbornfest is our flagship beer, but every single time that I make Stubbornfest, I'm always looking to change something ever so slightly, just so minutely, just to, if I can make that beer even just a little bit better every time I make it, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm not just hard, I don't have, Anheuser-Busch's old recipe for Budweiser, and this is just the way it is.
Right.
Like, no way. It's always, I'm always going to try to make it better.
Yeah.
And Adam does the same thing.
Word of mouth is it's the best form of marketing, obviously.
Yeah.
So, the more that you can use that to drive business, the better off you are. So we don't have the luxury of putting out an inferior product. We have to put out the best thing we can put out every single time.
Yeah,
right.
And I think sometimes, and I know even in our business, it's kind of humbling when you find yourself, in the back of your mind, maybe agreeing with that person, but you did what you had to do to create it, so you kind of bestow some quality upon it because you did it and you know what it took to get there, and somebody says, yeah, but it's off by 5%. If you would have done that, and then you go, damn it, yeah, you know what, so next time we'll do that. And to be able to have that flexibility instead of saying, no, this is how it's going to be. So and that's all you get.
I know we're about to wrap this episode up, and we got to get to the German word of the day, but we'll probably dive into this on the next episode. But what we're all drinking here, can you get into a little
Jared.
bit? This is the, I know, Chris is holding out on me.
Jared's got an empty glass.
This is the, is this new? This is the...
It's brand spanking new. We
brand
released it.
spanking new.
Yep.
Weeded whiskey. We
We released this last Saturday at the distillery. It's a distillery-only product for right now. This is our first ever bottled in bond product. So for whiskey nerds out there, you know what bottled in bond is, but at the end of the day, it's basically the highest statement of quality that the United States government regulates in whiskey. And it came about, E.H. Taylor, if you guys are familiar with that name, is kind of the guy who ushered this in. But there was inferior quality whiskey back in the day, so this is kind of the high bar in whiskey. So it's something we've kind of had, in our sights for a while. It's funny, though, because these products, I think Chris was here the first time, or Chris was with us whenever we sampled this the first time. I think it was 3 years ago at Whiskey in the Winter. Was the first time we pulled a sample of one of the barrels that's in here.
Holy cow, yeah, okay.
So, this is a really cool project because it's bottled in bond. So 4 years old. These are actually about 4.5. It's 4 barrels. It's bottled at exactly 100 proof. But the thing that we did differently, like the big guys will generally put their whiskey into a barrel at close to the legal maximum, which is 125 proof. Well, your big brands, Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, those types of things, legally you can bottle it as low as 80 proof. Well, how do you get it from 125 to 80? Stand there with your water hose, right? And add your water to it. So we did 3 barrels out of the 4 barrels in this release. We barreled them at 93 proof. So think about that. There's way less alcohol in that barrel, right? Because we've diluted it before we went in the barrel. 1 barrel we did at 120 proof. So when we blend those 4 barrels together, we should be very, very close to that 100 proof mark without having to add any water to it. So you get this really cool concentrated character of barrel proof without being, melt your mouth hot. Yeah. Like a George T. Stack 139 or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's still bottled and bond by the
legal
classification.
terms, yeah.
Exactly.
So it's pretty much the world's only bottled and bond barrel proof.
Yeah, this isn't a thing that everybody else does, right?
No, like that's it. That bottle on the table, that's it.
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's super cool.
Yeah, wheat whiskey in general is a really small category. I absolutely love this product because wheat gets a bad rap once in a while. Like wheated bourbon's a hot thing, but in distilling, wheat is always kind of considered like the lamer of the grains. Like it lets corn come through a little more.
Yeah.
This was really cool to see what people call that quote-unquote lame grain, what it can actually do on its own, and hey, it does stand on its own.
It does. Yeah.
And it's really good. I mean, I'm really enjoying. You could tell by my empty Glencairn glass that Chris had to top off. It's not just we tried this thing and it turned out this way. Like it's really good.
Yeah. And this,
thank you.
You say it stands on its own. I'm not sure I'll be able to stand on my own. A few more of these.
It'll be a team effort.
Before we leave this one, you mentioned that this is a 4-year. And this is a question that Jared's going to appreciate. If 8-year is the peak, to use lack of a better term, is this like a harmonic? Is like a halfway there? Is that a thing?
Yeah, kind of. Barrels go through a roller coaster of a life cycle. They get better, they get worse, they get better, they get worse. So it's about picking them at their peaks. And Chris knows one of the best people in the industry at that is Julian Van Winkle III for picking Pappy Van Winkle. So to say that this is exactly halfway of what the most complex whiskey is going to taste like, I don't think is a fair statement.
You're at a peak.
Yeah, I think we're at a peak right now.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, do you try... And if you're at a low point, you say, no, it's not ready yet, and plug it back up and wait for a peak? Is that how that works?
Yeah, so we try to do what we call anniversary tastings. So basically every time a barrel turns a year, we try to taste it and see what's going on. And the interesting thing is...
I try to do weekly tastings.
Right.
Yeah, that's my problem.
Why is this barrel empty?
Yeah. I do some tasting on my anniversary, too.
Yeah.
Yes, I do as well, yeah.
But the cool thing is we use it's crazy. Like if you look at a dollar bill, on the right side of it, there's like this little green seal. It's a key and like a balance.
Yeah.
That
Justice.
That one specifically signifies alcohol tax. So it's the weights and measures of alcohols, and the key designates the distilled spirits safe, and who had the key to that. So the tax man, basically.
Freaking Illuminati.
Yes, that's exactly. The all-seeing eye. No, but alcohol was taxed 100 years before income in this country, so it's a very important tax. That being the case, we have to keep track of every detail. We have to keep track of every pound of grain we use down to 2 decimal places, and every proof gallon of alcohol we produce down to 6 decimal places, and we have to file 5 monthly reports between. That's just Illinois and the federal. But that being the case, there are some really sophisticated tracking solutions out there. And we utilize one of them. And the really cool thing is that we'll go and we'll taste these barrels. You can grade the barrels, attach notes to them, and all that stuff. You can go back and kind of look at that barrel's tasting history. And we've actually got it tied back. We can drive all the way back to see which field that grain came out of, which variety of grain we put in the ground that year. So, yeah.
Nice.
As granular as you can possibly get. So
that is cool.
That's a bit of a tangent on the whiskey.
No, that's cool.
That's great.
I appreciate that granular level, which we will get into more in our next episode when we learn about the nuts and bolts
It's Kevin's polite way of saying, Adam, stay on track.
No, it's kind of a segue, actually. So I know that, people are listening and they're mentally drooling to try this. Where can somebody obtain a taste of the wheat whiskey?
The wheat whiskey, specifically at the distillery right now. We are working on some of that licensing we were talking about a little bit earlier. And you might find some local establishments that have really nice whiskey selections with possibly a bottle of this behind their bar somewhere.
Where could we find a place like that?
I don't know.
I don't know. Where could we?
I know a bar.
You know a bar?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is you can come to Stubborn German and buy a bottle of the brand new bottled and bond?
No, not yet.
Uh-oh.
Soon, though.
Soon.
You got to
Possibly.
keep stopping in.
All right.
Yeah, you got to keep checking.
Keep checking.
Check tomorrow.
All
check
right.
the next day. While you're here, grab a beer.
That's right.
It's a pint entry fee every time.
It's coming soon.
Well, on that
Yes.
note, I know that everybody is waiting with bated breath to learn what the German word of the day really is.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
Well,
The German word of the day. The word was Fass. Let's recap. Adam said it meant water.
Yeah, that's Vosser. I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
It is Wasser.
I know.
Jared said ferment, which I think
it means
Yeah.
Bowers.
Kevin said wheat.
Wheat.
Weizen.
I know. It's right there on the wall, for Christ's sake.
Fass means barrel.
Barrel.
It's only one syllable. How could it mean barrel?
It means barrel.
Fass.
Fass, barrel.
Well,
Sorry.
I thought
Sorry.
we had it.
No,
You know what?
we're
We'll play
maintaining the
again.
tradition.
We'll play again on episode 2.
Don't worry,
right.
nobody's ever won this, so there's been 0 prizes and 0 victories. But I think this whole show is a victory. We appreciate you coming on, and we're going to get right back into it. So if you're listening, like I said, subscribe, because there's more to this story of Stumpy's Distillery to come.
Oh, it's going to get crazy.
Oh, I know. It's gonna be off the chain. So one of our outgoing traditions is to have a toast on this podcast. So for Mr. Chris Ron, Mr. Jared Chasson, Adam Stumpf, I'm Kevin Oosty saying Prost. Prost. All right, checking levels. This I don't know what numbered microphone this is, but
You are number 2.
Ooh, good for me, because Chris is always number 1.
I'm
That's
number
right.
1.
That's right.
He makes me do
Kevin,
that.
someday when you get your own podcast, you can be number 1.
I'm number 2 all the time, especially days like today.
I feel like I'm low. Why do I always feel like I'm low?
Are you?
Yeah.
I turn you down. No, you're
You're just high in your cans.
you're
we
pretty
go.
hot, Chris. I gotta say.
Hot night.
Thanks.